All right, so get this. Today, uh, we're diving into a story that's going to have you wondering about prison life and fandom. You know, just human nature, really.
Oh, this is a good one.
We're talking Decca Heggie, right? So a bare-knuckle boxer. Guy's practically got a cot on reserve in the prison system, am I right?
Yeah, he's got a history, that's for sure. But
But this time,
this time it's different.
it's not his fists making the headlines. It's something else, something much, well, weirder.
Definitely unexpected.
So lay it on me. What's the story with this Decca guy? What's got everyone buzzing this time?
All right, well, buckle up, because it all starts with Decca becoming a jailhouse heartthrob.
Wait, hold on. Do you say heartthrob? As in women are swooning over this guy while he's locked up?
You heard right. The article we've got here, it lays it all out. It's actually pretty wild.
Okay, you've got to give me the details. How does a bare-knuckle boxer, someone who settles things with his fists, become a heartthrob from behind bars?
Well, picture this. Decca's in his cell, right? Standard prison fare. And one day, out of the blue, a pink perfume envelope appears on his cell floor.
A pink, perfumed envelope. Sounds like a scene straight out of a movie. All right, I'm hooked. Who sent it?
It was from an inmate, woman named Sharon, locked up at a different facility. Apparently, she'd caught a glimpse of Decca in some, YouTube video or something, and that was it. She was smitten.
Love at first YouTube viewing. That's a new one.
Right. And the kicker is, in the letter, she's going on about this heart of gold she sees in him beneath the rough exterior.
Okay, so maybe a little bit of the bad boy appeal, but come on, one letter, even one as flowery as that, doesn't make you a heartthrob. Yeah. What happened next?
Oh, it didn't stop there. That's the thing. That pink envelope, it was like a beacon or something. Soon, Decca's cell was practically overflowing with letters. Photographs, too. Even hand-drawn portraits. All from women in prisons across the country.
You're kidding. So we've moved past a single admirer. This is a full-blown fan club. What are they writing in these letters? Are we talking marriage proposals already?
Huh. Not quite proposals, but it's pretty close. I mean, they're comparing him to romantic heroes, for crying out loud. Declarations of love, promises of tattoos in his honor, the works.
Wow, this is insane. The guy's a legend. But I gotta ask, what's the vibe like in the prison? Are his fellow inmates lining up for autographs? Or are they a little less enthusiastic about Decca's newfound fame?
Yeah, you can imagine it's not all sunshine and roses. The article, it introduces this character, Johnny Big Nose, and let me tell you, the name fits the stereotype.
Oh boy, I think I can picture this guy. So Big Nose is not exactly thrilled about Decca's fan mail, right?
About one bit. Johnny, he's the embodiment of every jealous inmate rolled into one. He even confronts Decca, demanding to know, "What's your secret, mate?" Like it's some kind of magic trick.
Oh, this is too good. I bet Decca ate it up.
Yeah.
So did he share his secrets? What's the secret formula for becoming a prison heartthrob?
Well, Decca being Decca, he just shrugs it off, Plays it cool, credits it to his mystery and winning personality. Though, reading between the lines, you can tell he's loving the attention. Oh, he's definitely soaking it up.
Who wouldn't? It's like he's the king of the castle, but instead of ruling through fear, it's fan mail and hand-drawn portraits.
It's a fascinating dynamic, really.
Totally.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, what is it about this guy? I mean, these women haven't even met him. They're falling for, an idea of him.
That's just it, isn't it? It's this whole parasocial thing.
Parasocial. You're going to have to break that down for me.
Right. So it's like, when people get super invested in celebrities, like they feel like they actually know them.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
But that's usually reserved for, movie stars and pop singers, not exactly hardened criminals.
Right. But in this case, it's amplified. Think about it. These women are in prison. Their world is small, controlled. Decca, through these letters and rumors, he becomes this blank slate for them.
So they're projecting their own desires onto him, their fantasies.
Exactly. He's this blank canvas onto which they can paint their ideal man, their escape from the realities of prison life.
And the fact that he's locked up in another prison probably adds to the allure. He's unattainable.
Oh, absolutely. No chance of a messy breakup when there's a wall of bars between you.
True, very true. But this bad boy thing, it's almost cliche, isn't it? Why is that so appealing, especially in a place like prison?
Well, it's more than just being a bad boy. It's what that represents. A sense of rebellion, a disregard for rules.
Which, in a place like prison, where rules are everything.
Exactly. It's a powerful image. Plus, there's the strength aspect, the feeling of protection, which can be appealing in an environment where vulnerability is often seen as a weakness.
So Decca ticks all the boxes. He's tough, He's mysterious. He's completely unavailable.
The perfect fantasy boyfriend, at least within the confines of the prison system.
All right, so we've talked about the letters, the infatuation, but what about, the perks? Don't tell me those hand-knit scarves weren't making their way through the prison mailroom.
Oh, you better believe it. The article, it talks about Decca receiving all sorts of gifts. Sketches, mixtapes, you name it. And we're not talking about just little trinkets here. These were expressions of adoration, tokens of affection.
I've got a whole economy built on Decca Heggie fandom.
It's remarkable, and it really highlights how social hierarchies exist everywhere, even in prison.
Right, so where does this newfound fame place Decca in that hierarchy?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? He's not running a smuggling ring or anything.
But he's got something else, something that transcends the traditional power structures.
Absolutely. He's a source of fascination, envy, even amusement. And get this, even the guards get swept up in the whole thing.
Wait, what? The guards, are they asking for his autograph too?
Not quite, but close. Remember Big Dave, the tough-as-nails guard from the article?
Yeah, what about him?
He goes to Decca for advice.
Advice? About what?
Relationship advice. Apparently, Big Dave's marriage is on the rocks, and he sees Decca as some kind of love guru.
You've got to be kidding me. A prison guard is taking relationship advice from a bare-knuckle boxer serving time.
I know, right? But that's the thing about this story. It's full of these absurd, head-scratching moments.
It's like the whole prison system is tilting on its axis a little bit.
And it's all thanks to Decca Heggie and his unexpected fan club.
I mean, you really couldn't make this stuff up.
It's a reminder that life, even behind bars, can be stranger than fiction.
No doubt about that. But it also makes you think, doesn't it? What does this say about us? About our need for connection, even in the most unexpected places? It's kind of like he's accidentally become this, I don't know, like a folk hero or something.
It's the accidental part that makes it so interesting, right? Like these women are building up this whole image of him, and who knows how accurate it actually is.
Right, like are they picturing Romeo in there? And Decca's really more like, I don't know, like a bruiser with a soft spot for stray cats. We don't really know.
Exactly. And yet that image, that fantasy, it has real power. I mean, look at the impact it's having. He's shaking things up without even trying.
It really is wild. Okay, so the big question, does Decca know the effect he's having? Like, is he leaning into this heartthrob thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Part of me thinks he's got to be in on the joke.
Right, like winking at the guards while he's reading his fan mail?
But there's another part, and maybe this is me being a bit too optimistic, but maybe there's a part of him that's genuinely touched by it all.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, even if it's based on a fantasy, this kind of attention, it can be, well, validating.
Absolutely. And let's not forget, we're talking about a fundamental human need here. Connection. It's something we all crave. And in prison, where you're cut off, isolated.
That need's got to be even stronger.
Exactly. So maybe these letters, they're a reminder that even in the toughest circumstances, even behind bars, that need for human connection, it finds a way.
It's a powerful thought, isn't it? That even a bare-knuckle boxer can become a symbol of hope, of romance, even if it's all thanks to a few pink envelopes and a whole lot of imagination.
This whole story, it makes you think about the things we seek out, the meaning we create, even in the most unexpected places.
Decca Heggie, prison heartthrob. Who would have thought? It's funny, it's bizarre, and you know what? It's kind of beautiful in its own way.
Absolutely. And it reminds us life can surprise you. Sometimes the most profound truths, they come from the most unexpected places, and that's something worth remembering.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Okay.
So, next time you think you've got it all figured out, remember Decca Heggie and his unlikely fan club. There's always more to the story than meets the eye.
Okay, so get ready, because today we're doing a deep dive on someone I think you guys are going to find really interesting. We're looking at Decca Heggie.
Yeah, this should be a good one.
Yeah, you've sent us a bunch of YouTube clips, and it's like raw footage of this guy's life.
Raw is a good way to put it.
He's a former bare-knuckle boxer, and now he runs a security firm and a fighting company.
Yeah, a real Renaissance man.
This guy, Decca Heggie, he seems like quite the character, like one of these guys where we're really going to have our hands full with this deep dive.
Yeah, for sure.
We're piecing together a picture of him based on these little snippets, these glimpses into his life. It's really interesting how much of what we see feels like a performance.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's constructing a persona for the camera. Like, who is Decca Heggie trying to convince us or himself,
That's such a good point.
you know?
Yeah, and he really doesn't hold back on the self-promotion either. He's constantly going on about being this undefeated fighter,
Right.
about having connections to Tyson Fury's camp,
Of course. Gotta have that.
about running with a firm.
Yeah.
It's almost comical how over the top it is.
Like a caricature almost.
He even compared himself to Charles Bronson at one point.
Right. Well, that name dropping is interesting.
Mm.
It speaks to this desire to align himself with a certain image. The tough guy, the one you don't mess with.
Yeah.
He seems to be crafting this image of power and invincibility.
But then he tries to soften the edges a bit. You know, he talks about being a changed man, respectful of women because he loves his Nana.
Right.
So it's like he's trying to balance this tough guy persona with this image of someone who's sensitive deep down, you know?
Yeah. And that's where we start to see the potential signs of what psychologists call narcissistic personality disorder. This often involves having a grandiose sense of self-importance, a deep need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. And while we can't diagnose anyone from afar, these boasts and contradictions do seem to fit that pattern.
It really makes you wonder what's driving this need to control the narrative, to shape how people see him.
Yeah, what's he compensating for? Makes you wonder.
And speaking of contradictions, things take a turn when he interacts with Stephanie, this undercover journalist who reached out to him. What starts as somewhat charming quickly reveals some concerning behaviors.
Like what?
Well, he starts complimenting her, telling her she's different from other women, but it doesn't take long for those compliments to morph into something. Well, less flattering.
Less flattering how?
Well, he actually says to her at one point, "You're mine now," and starts dictating how she should behave, who she can and can't talk to.
And that's a classic example of coercive control. It's a pattern of behaviors used to dominate and control a partner. And it's not just about jealousy either. It's about power and isolation. You see, he's trying to cut her off from her support system, making her more dependent on him.
Yeah, it's really unsettling to hear. Like, he even tells her to delete social media, says he doesn't trust her contacts. It's like he's trying to trap her in his world.
Exactly. And that isolation is often a precursor to more serious forms of abuse. By controlling her access to information and support, he gains a dangerous level of power and influence over her.
It's chilling to think about. And what's striking is how quickly he jumps from these attempts at charm to outright rage. Like, one minute he's complimenting her, and the next he's furious over the mere suggestion that she might find someone else attractive, even hypothetically.
Yeah, that level of possessiveness is really concerning. It speaks to a deep-seated insecurity and a need to control her every thought and feeling.
Yeah.
He's projecting his own fears and insecurities onto her, making her responsible for managing his emotions.
It's a lot to unpack, and just when you think you have him figured out, he flips the script and starts talking about his own vulnerabilities.
Yeah, this is where things get even more complex.
Yeah.
He reveals some very personal and painful experiences, talking about past sexual abuse, suicide attempts, struggles with mental health.
It's heavy stuff, and you can't help but feel a sense of empathy for anyone who's gone through such trauma. But then the question arises, is he using these past experiences as a way to deflect responsibility for his current actions?
That's the big question, isn't it? I mean, it's crucial to acknowledge that trauma can have a profound impact on someone's behavior. However, it's never an excuse for abuse.
And the timing of these confessions is interesting, isn't it? It often seems to happen right after he's been particularly controlling or aggressive towards Stephanie.
Exactly. It's like clockwork. He explodes, she pushes back, and suddenly he's the victim, seeking comfort and understanding. It's a classic manipulation tactic designed to shift the focus away from his harmful behavior and back onto himself.
It's like he's almost weaponizing his past trauma to avoid being held accountable for what he's doing in the present. Right.
And it makes it that much harder to figure out what's genuine and what's manipulation.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that human behavior is rarely black and white.
Right.
People can be both victims of trauma and perpetrators of abuse.
For sure.
And I think it's not about excusing his actions, but understanding the complex factors that might be driving them.
Yeah, absolutely. And just when we start to delve into this whole other layer of his personality, he pivots again.
What's he on to now?
It's back to the firm and his business dealings.
Ah, yeah.
Remember all that?
Of course.
Yeah, so he's going on and on about his security business, right?
Yeah.
But then there are all these little comments about violence weapons expanding his influence,
I see.
and it starts to feel a lot more ominous than it did before.
Yeah, this is where those underlying threads of control and power all seem to converge. He boasts about his security business, But then there are these mentions of violence, weapons, expanding his influence. It starts to feel more ominous, like how much of this is performance for the camera.
It's like he's trying to intimidate people almost.
Yeah, is he trying to intimidate potential rivals? Or is this a glimpse into a darker reality, a world where he really does wield that kind of power?
Yeah, and it really makes you think back to those original questions we had.
Like what?
Like, who is Decca Heggie?
Right.
What is the purpose of all these videos?
Yeah.
And what about Stephanie? I mean, this is an undercover journalist who's going undercover to get this footage of him.
Right.
And she's putting herself in a potentially risky situation.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Her presence adds a whole other layer of complexity to this story. Is she a willing participant in this, aware of the image he's trying to project? Or is she in over her head walking a tightrope to expose something darker?
It's hard to imagine anyone willingly subjecting themselves to that kind of treatment.
I know.
But then again, journalists often go to great lengths to get the story.
Oh, they absolutely do. And that raises questions about the ethics of it all. Is it responsible to engage with someone like this knowing his tendencies, potentially putting yourself at risk? Or is it important to expose those tendencies to show the world what's hiding behind the bravado?
It's a tough call.
It really is.
And there are no easy answers.
Not at all.
But you know what I think is so interesting about this whole deep dive is that it forces us to confront these questions head on. We live in a world that is just saturated with curated content.
Oh,
Like everyone has this perfect, polished version of themselves online.
oh yeah.
And then you have Decca Heggie.
Yeah.
This raw, unfiltered glimpse into one man's complexities, contradictions, and disturbing behaviors.
And you know what's left for you, the listener, is this: don't take everything at face value.
It's so true.
Question the narratives you encounter both online and in your own life. Look for those subtle signs of manipulation and control. And never underestimate the power of insecurity and the lengths people will go to mask it.
Well said. Decca Heggie might just be some name that you stumbled upon online. But this deep dive into his world, I think it reminds us that things are rarely black and white. Be critical, be curious, and keep asking questions. Until next time.
All right, then. Ready to dive into this Decca Heggie thing? I gotta say, this one's got the internet spun up, and it's not just the arrest itself, you know?
No, not at all. It's the whole free speech can of worms, right? What you can say online, what you can't.
Exactly. So we're digging into this live stream, Hedgehog Live, this guy Hedgehog Man and his co-host Chrissy. They're breaking down Heggie's arrest, pulling straight from news articles and stuff. It's actually pretty wild.
Yeah, and the speed at which this all went down is, well, it's pretty telling, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. So Hedgehog Man's going through these articles, right? And he lays out the charge. Racially aggravated offensive online content. That's under the Malicious Communications Act, which I'm guessing most people don't know about.
And for good reason. It's pretty dense legal stuff. But essentially, it makes it illegal to send anything seriously offensive or threatening through, well, pretty much any online platform.
So emails, social media, the whole shebang.
Pretty much. And the racially aggravated part is important because it means the offense was specifically designed to, stir up hatred based on race. That can mean a much more serious sentence.
Wow, okay. And get this, Heggie's actually in custody until his court date, which Hedgehog Man seemed to think was a big deal.
Yeah, it's not usually a slam dunk like that. You got to wonder if they're making an example out of him, especially with all the, the climate we're in right now.
It's a thought, for sure. And it gets even crazier because there are two other guys who were arrested around the same time as Heggie. Hedgehog Man said it's part of a bigger police operation, targeting something they're calling potential planned disorder.
They even arrested one guy, Billy Thompson, just for a comment he made on Facebook about the police.
Yeah, and he got hit with a 12-week jail sentence, which, I mean, that's just for a comment, one comment. Even if it was bad, it raises some serious questions about, like, is that really fair? Is that going too far?
12 weeks. That's insane. You really have to think twice about what you say online. And there's a third guy, they didn't name him, facing charges for, get this, encouraging violence against police and trying to start trouble on Facebook. But here's the thing. He says he's not gutty. Which means this is going to court, and the whole thing about what encouraging violence actually means online, that's going to be a huge deal. This could set a precedent,
So it's not just about saying something awful. It's about what the courts say is going too far. This is big.
Huge. Think about it. Someone posts something in one country, and it causes problems on the other side of the world. Whose laws are we talking about then? It's a global mess.
Makes you realize how much power our words really have, right? It's not just a small thing anymore.
And then there's a whole other issue. Who's supposed to be in charge of all this? Is it the governments? Is it the social media companies?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Ah.
And it's not just theoretical either. Hedgehog Man pointed out that all of Heggie's videos, even the ones flagged by people on YouTube as bad, they were all still up when he got arrested.
Exactly. It shows how tough it is for these platforms to manage everything. They're stuck between letting people speak their minds and stopping things before they get out of control. There's no easy answer. Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, you get freedom of speech, right? That's kind of a big deal in a democracy. But then you've got people potentially getting hurt, violence, discrimination, all that. It's a tightrope walk for sure.
And the way they just swooped in on Heggie and these other guys, it does feel like a show of force, doesn't it? Like Hedgehog Man said, a sweeping up. It's like they're trying to send a message.
Right. He really hit on something there, even if his language is a little, colorful. Is this really just about these specific guys, or are they making an example out of them to scare others into line? That's a whole other can of worms when you think about it. Especially with everything going on, like Hedgehog Man said something about national disturbances mentioned in the article. That's got to play into it, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, even if they are guilty, what's the best way to handle it? Is throwing them in jail really the answer? Or are there better ways to deal with this stuff, the hate speech, and stop it from getting worse?
It's a massive question. And honestly, I don't think there's one easy answer. I mean, education's got to be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
And talking to each other, actually trying to understand where this stuff comes from in the first place.
For sure. But it's got to be a conversation we're all having, not just like judges and lawyers. This is bigger than that. Speaking of, there was this one comment Hedgehog Man read from his chat that really stuck with me. It was like, all these comments are being screenshotted. Kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, for sure. On one hand, it's good for accountability, right? People thinking twice before they say something horrible. But then there's a whole Big Brother thing, Is it okay to constantly be watching what everyone's saying, even if they're not technically doing anything illegal?
It's like everyone's walking on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing.
And the thing is, it's not just some shadowy government agency listening in. Hedgehog Man pointed out that the police didn't even have to ask YouTube for Heggie's videos. It was all right there for anyone to see. Which I guess is the price of admission these days, isn't it? Everything's out in the open.
Yeah, the whole digital footprint thing. It's not just what you post today. It's everything going way back.
Right, and that's where these social media platforms, they've got a lot of power, right? They're not just letting us post whatever. They're deciding what we see, what gets promoted, all that. It makes you wonder about their responsibility here. Like, even if someone's not breaking the law, don't they have some obligation to protect people?
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. And with every case like this, it seems like more questions pop up than answers. But you mentioned earlier, the third guy, the one from Maryport, he actually pled not guilty, which is different. Do we know anything more about that, like what his defense is going to be?
It's really interesting, right? Unfortunately, Hedgehog Man's live stream didn't really get into all the legal nitty-gritty. But it'll be really interesting to see how this all plays out, because this could have a big impact on how we think about online speech going forward.
Yeah, no kidding. So it sounds like this case, it could come down to how the courts interpret these laws. Like, what exactly does encouraging violence even mean when you're talking about the internet?
Right. It's not black and white. It's not just someone saying, I'm going to go do this horrible thing. It's more nuanced than that. It's about context and intent. It's going to be fascinating to see how this case shakes out.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot to think about, that's for sure. But before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I wanted to loop back to something else Hedgehog Man said. He seemed almost kind of, wistful maybe, when he was talking about Heggie's older stuff, before things got really dark.
It's like we forget these people online, the real people,
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama, but there's a human being behind all of this. And it makes you wonder, what is it about being online that makes people say and do things they'd never dream of doing in person?
It's like we're all living in some crazy reality show, but the stakes are way higher than just who gets voted off the island, right?
Yeah, it makes you think about those who are on the receiving end of Heggie's, his hate. What impact did his words have on them? How do we even begin to measure the harm caused by online hate speech?
That's a really good point. It's easy to get caught up in the legal stuff, the free speech debate, but at the end of the day, real people are getting hurt by this stuff.
Exactly. And it's something we need to keep in mind as we have these conversations.
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think about the human cost of all this. It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the legal back and forth, but this is real life.
Absolutely. And it reminds us to, approach these conversations with a bit of empathy and understanding. But I'm curious, you mentioned earlier about the charges against Heggie. What exactly was it that got him in trouble? We keep hearing about this racially aggravated offensive content, but what does that really mean, legally speaking?
Right, like what's the line here?
Well, if I remember correctly from Hedgehog Man's live stream, he was charged under something called the Malicious Communications Act. We touched on it a bit earlier, but it basically covers a whole bunch of stuff related to online communication.
So it's not just about, like, hate speech then.
No, it's broader than that. But in Hagee's case, it sounds like it was the racially aggravated part of his most that really got him in hot water. It suggests that the authorities thought he was trying to stir up racial hatred, or at the very least, that his posts were motivated by some kind of racial bias.
That makes sense, and it seems like that's what makes these cases so tricky, right? The intent behind the words.
Yeah.
It's not always as simple as someone saying, I'm going to go hurt someone kind of thing.
Exactly. And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Where do we draw the line? When does offensive speech cross over into hate speech? When do words online turn into actual harm in the real world? These are the questions that courts all over the world are trying to figure out, and there's no easy answer.
It's like we're making up the rules as we go, right? The law is trying to catch up. Social media is changing everything, even what we think of as free speech. It's a whole new world.
It really is. And this whole case with Heggie and these other guys, it shows just how fast things are moving. We've got these preemptive arrests, people getting banned from social media as part of their bail conditions, the possibility of serious jail time just for something you said online. It's a lot to take in.
No kidding. It definitely makes you think twice.
Hmm.
But before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to the unnamed guy, the one from Maryport. He pled not guilty, which is interesting. Did Hedgehog Man say anything more about that, like what his defense might be?
He didn't really get into the weeds on that one. But if I had to guess, I'd say his lawyers are probably going to go after the whole encouraging violence and promoting disorder thing. They might argue that his posts, even if they were offensive, were still protected under free speech.
So it could be a battle of interpretations then.
Exactly. It could all come down to the specific words he used, what he meant by them, whether the prosecution can actually prove that his online stuff was directly linked to a real risk of violence or public disorder.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. This could have a ripple effect on how we understand online speech going forward.
No doubt. This case, and all the ones we've talked about today, they really highlight how important it is to have these conversations about free speech in the digital age. And not just the legal stuff, but our values, our responsibilities as citizens of this online world. What kind of digital world do we want to live in?
Right, one where we can speak our minds, but also keep each other safe. It's a tough balance to strike.
You said it. And this case, for all its messiness and complications, it's a good reminder that we've got to keep working at it.
Well said. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the Decca Heggie case and what it means for free speech online. We hope this has given you something to think about and maybe even spark some important conversations of your own. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time. All right, so get ready, because today we are diving into a world that's raw, brutal, and completely captivating.
Yeah, this one's a wild ride, that's for sure.
We're talking bare-knuckle boxing, but not just the sport itself. We're going deep into the life of a champion whose story is more gripping than any fight could ever be. Decca Heggie.
And you weren't kidding about a wild ride. Drugs, near-death experiences, you name it. This guy's life has it all.
You got that right. We're talking about the self-proclaimed most trolled man in the UK, Decca Heggie.
Oh yeah, he's definitely got that title for a reason, and we are going to unpack all of it.
But is that the whole story? Is he really just a walking controversy? That's what we're here to figure out. But before we get into all that...
We could start at the beginning.
Exactly, at the beginning. So, Decca Heggie, bare-knuckle boxing champ, where does it all begin?
Well, his childhood is definitely not what you'd expect. I mean, this is a guy who went from being absolutely terrified to fight back against bullies to becoming a bare-knuckle boxing champ.
Wow, that's quite a transformation.
Yeah, you could say that again. It's almost like he went from 0 to 100, just like that.
So where did he grow up? What was his childhood like?
He grew up in a place called Old Harrowby, which is a housing estate in Carlisle, England. And let me tell you, it wasn't the easiest place to grow up. It was rough around the edges, and it seems like Decca's childhood was marked by a lot of fear, especially when it came to this one bully.
I see. So this bully really had a lasting impact on him.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes you think, right? Like, how much of Decca's drive, his need to prove himself, stems from those early experiences?
It's like he's trying to rewrite his story, conquer those past demons.
Exactly. And then you've got his dad, who went by the nickname Diet Chips.
Diet chips. Okay, I'm going to need some more information on that one.
Right. It's the most ironic nickname ever. Everything we've read about him screams hard as nails. Like, the kind of guy who you wouldn't want to mess with, a real tough guy persona.
And you can imagine that probably influenced Decca in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. It's like he inherited this tough guy blueprint.
So we've got a rough childhood, a tough guy father figure. It's almost like a recipe for ending up in a world like bare-knuckle boxing. But for those of us who aren't familiar, what exactly is bare-knuckle boxing?
Well, picture boxing, right. But take away the gloves, the rules, all of it. It's just two guys in a ring, bare fists, going at it. Brutal, raw, and often very dangerous.
You said dangerous, and I think it's important to remember that it's not just the fighters who are at risk here. Decca's own family has been threatened because of his involvement in this world.
Absolutely. Decca himself said it's always linked to the underworld. And when you think about it, it makes sense. There's a lot of money involved, shady characters, the whole 9 yards.
It's a whole other level of intensity, a whole other world. And Decca seems to have been drawn to that world, almost like he was trying to conquer his past demons by facing them head on.
Right. It's like he's both running towards something and running away from something at the same time.
A classic case of fight or flight. But in Decca's case, he always chooses to fight.
Exactly. And this is where things get really interesting because Decca's story doesn't just stop at bare-knuckle boxing. This guy, he dabbled in acting, podcasting. It's like he was searching for something more.
Trying to find his place in the world, maybe?
Maybe. Or maybe he was trying to outrun the bare-knuckle brawler label.
Either way, you can't deny that this guy's life was anything but ordinary.
Oh, absolutely not. He was a walking contradiction, full of complexities and contradictions, and that's what makes his story so fascinating.
So we've got this guy, right, this bare-knuckle brawler trying to make a name for himself outside the ring, trying his hand at acting, even starting a podcast. It's like he's trying to outrun his past, but the past keeps catching up with him.
It's like he's got this energy inside him, this need to prove himself, but he's not sure where to direct it.
And that's where things get really interesting, because even when he's trying to do something different, it seems like trouble just seems to find him. Like that incident with the road workers while he was recording his podcast.
Oh, yeah, that was a whole thing. I mean, talk about a guy who can't seem to escape conflict, even when he's trying to do something as simple as recording a podcast.
It's like wherever Decca Heggie goes, drama follows. But even with the acting and the podcasting, the thing that really seemed to blow up, the thing that really made him infamous, was the online world. It's like he stepped into a whole new fighting ring, and this time the stakes were even higher.
Absolutely. And this is where that most trolled man in the UK label really takes hold. And to understand it, you have to wrap your head around the sheer scale of the online hate he was receiving. This wasn't just a few mean comments here and there. We're talking organized campaigns to discredit him, to ruin his reputation.
Wow, organized campaigns. That's intense. But what was it about him that attracted that level of hatred?
Well, it's ironic, but it seems like his openness, his willingness to talk about his past struggles, that's what made him such a target.
Really? You'd think that would make people more sympathetic.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But it's almost like the more vulnerable he was, the more ammunition he gave to the trolls, and the accusations were relentless. Rumors about his personal life, claims that he was faking his attempts at reform, people trying to sabotage his acting and podcasting gigs. It was constant.
It's like they wanted to see him fail.
It often seems that way. And knowing Decca, I bet he didn't back down from those online battles.
Oh, I doubt it. This is a guy who's made a career out of fighting.
Exactly. His instinct was always to fight back, to meet aggression with aggression. But in the online world, that often backfires.
Because it just fuels the fire.
Exactly. Every angry response, every attempt to defend himself, it just gave them more to work with. It's like he was trapped in a digital echo chamber of hate.
And this brings us back to that whole nature versus nurture debate. Was this need to fight, this inability to back down, is that a product of his rough upbringing? Or was it just part of who he is?
It's a question that's probably crossed Decca's own mind a few times, I'm sure, because even when he's trying to create a different path for himself, even when he's trying to be the better man, he ends up right back in the ring, battling it out with these faceless antagonists.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
And that's what makes Decca's story so tragic in a way. He's battling his own demons, yeah, but he's also battling a force that's bigger than him, a force that's designed to keep him trapped in that cycle of conflict. And it makes you wonder, can he ever truly break free? Or is he destined to forever be the most trolled man in the UK?
It's a question that I don't think has an easy answer, but it's definitely a question worth exploring. It's like he's fighting a losing battle, but he keeps getting back up.
He does. He keeps going. And you know what? That's something you got to respect about Deca Heggie, that resilience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can say what you want about the guy, but he's a fighter.
That's for sure.
He's got this undeniable spirit. And it makes you wonder, what is it that keeps him going?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Is it that need for redemption? Is it that desire to prove everyone wrong?
Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just who he is.
Maybe. But whenever it is, it makes for a captivating story.
Absolutely. Decca Heggie is a walking contradiction, a guy who's both deeply flawed and strangely compelling.
He is. And, his story, it's a reminder that things aren't always black and white.
Right, there's a lot of gray area.
Exactly. And sometimes the toughest battles are fought within.
And those battles, they're not always pretty.
Nope. They're messy, they're complicated, and they rarely have easy answers.
But they make us human.
They do, and they make us question everything.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the enigma that is Decca Heggie. The bare-knuckle brawler, the ex-con, the internet punching bag, a man who reminds us that sometimes the toughest opponent is ourselves.
The Deep Dive is a production of Your Company. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review.
Okay, so gotta say, some deep dives we get are like, kind of like opening a history book,
Yeah.
But this one feels like we're about to crack open like a wild night out told by, well, the kind of guy who tells those stories.
Oh, I know the type.
Yeah, exactly. So we're diving into this story. This guy calls himself the King of the Night, Decca Heggie.
King of the Night.
Right. And the source material, it's like, I don't know, reading a very enthusiastic self-report. Like if you took self-mythologizing and added a disco ball.
Right, because everyone knows those are the most reliable narrators.
Oh, totally. But that's what makes it fun, right? So Decca, our king, picture this. Slicked back hair, tattoos galore, constantly comparing himself to like a prize fighter or something.
Ah, so we're dealing with a classic case of someone crafting a persona. It's fascinating how often that pops up, this need to control how others see us. In psychology, we call it impression management, often a way of masking insecurities, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And Decca, he's not exactly subtle, right? Like the source material even says he's always saying he's the most feared and respected guy around, which, come on.
Yeah, that's not exactly the mark of someone secure in their position. It's like they need constant reassurance from the outside world to validate their self-worth.
Validation? Or maybe just attention?
Could be both, right? They often go hand in hand.
True, true. Okay, so Decca, King of the Night, where does he go to claim his kingdom?
Let me guess. Somewhere with flashing lights and loud music.
Bingo. A club. Friday night. Prime time for ego inflation.
The perfect stage for a carefully crafted persona.
Oh, he waltzes in like he owns the place, scanning the room, locks eyes with two women at the bar. I'm already cringing just picturing it.
The spotlight effect. He probably thinks every eye in the place is on him.
Guaranteed. And this is where it gets good, okay. He marches right up to them and I quote, "Hope you brought your best selves tonight because Decca Heggie is in the building."
Oh, wow. That's a choice. I'm actually curious to know what their reaction was.
Right. Surprisingly, they weren't immediately turned off. The source material actually says they were more amused than anything. Like maybe they've seen this act before.
Maybe they recognized the insecurity lurking beneath the bravado.
Or maybe they just had a good sense of humor about it.
It's a survival tactic in those situations.
So Decca, ever the gentleman, buys them drinks. And this is where it gets interesting. Because he starts telling stories.
Ah, yes, the stories. This is where the self-mythologizing really comes out to play.
Oh, absolutely. It's like suddenly he's the most interesting man in the world, right? Full of daring escapes, impossible feats of strength. He's practically a superhero in his own mind.
And the alcohol probably isn't helping keep those stories grounded in reality.
Oh, for sure. But here's the thing. Does he believe it, or is it all just, like, performance art?
It's a good question. It's like when people exaggerate stories to impress a date, is it a conscious lie or have they convinced themselves it's true? Maybe a bit of both.
Right. It's like, what's that thing? Selective memory. Like, maybe he's rewritten his own history in his head.
It's entirely possible. Our minds are remarkably good at holding on to narratives that reinforce our self-image, even if they're not entirely accurate.
And the night goes on, right? More drinks, more stories, and the stories, they just get, like, more and more unbelievable.
Classic case of alcohol loosening those inhibitions. What starts as embellishment turns into, well, full-blown fiction.
Oh, yeah. It's like he's competing in some kind of, I don't know, most outrageous tale contest. Like, I swear, at one point, the source material says he's standing on a table, shirt halfway unbuttoned, telling everyone about the time he wrestled an alligator.
It's almost like he wants to be called out, don't you think?
Oh.
Like, deep down, he's looking for someone to say, okay, now you're just messing with us.
Maybe. Or maybe he's just so caught up in his own performance that he can't tell the difference anymore.
That's the danger of relying on external validation, isn't it? You lose sight of what's real, what actually matters.
And speaking of seeing through things, the women he's with, yeah, they're on to him.
They're not buying the act.
Not for a second. The source material actually uses the phrase more bravado than brains to describe their take on Decca.
Ouch. But also accurate. There's a difference between confidence and arrogance, you know? True confidence doesn't need all that noise.
Right. It's like the louder someone proclaims their greatness, the less likely they are to actually be great.
Exactly. It's like that saying, empty vessels make the most noise.
Okay, I love that. Stealing that one. But anyway, so Decca, oblivious as ever, he's misinterpreting all of this, right? He thinks they're laughing with him, not at him.
The ego, it's a master of delusion.
Tell me about it. And it gets better. So the night's winding down, and what does our king of the night do?
Don't tell me. He invites them back to his castle.
His lion's den, as he calls it. Like, seriously, who talks like that?
Someone who's really leaning into that whole alpha male fantasy.
Oh, 100%. And of course, the women politely decline, which he somehow interprets as them playing hard to get.
Denial, a powerful drug.
So the night ends, right? Decca's convinced he's ruled the kingdom, showered in glory and admiration.
And the reality is?
Well, let's just say the reality is probably a lot less glamorous and a lot less accurate.
And that disconnect, that gap between self-perception and how others see us, that's where things get really interesting. Makes you wonder, does Decca ever figure it out?
Does he ever have that moment of self-awareness where he realizes maybe, just maybe, he's not the king of the night? Makes you think, right? Like, how many Decca Heggies are out there just, I don't know, living in their own little self-made movie?
More than we realize, probably. We all do it to some extent, you know? We create these narratives about ourselves, these carefully curated versions we present to the world.
Oh, totally. It's like we all want to put our best foot forward, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes it feels like we're practically strapping on a whole new pair of legs.
And that's the thing, isn't it? True confidence, it's not about the performance. It's about being comfortable with who you are, even the messy bits.
Exactly. Like, maybe it's okay if you're not the king of the night. Maybe being the court jester is more your style, or even just like a regular dude enjoying a night out.
Right. It's about finding those genuine connections, those people who appreciate you for you, not for some inflated persona you're trying to project.
And you know what? Sometimes those connections, they come when you least expect it. Maybe even when you're not trying so hard to impress everyone in a 5-mile radius.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, authenticity is way more attractive than any fabricated crown or self-proclaimed title.
So to all the Deca Heggies out there, and let's be honest, we all have a little bit of Decca in us. Maybe just take a breath, ditch the act, and see what happens. You might be surprised who you connect with when you let the real you shine through. And hey, on that note, we'll leave you with that thought. Until next time, keep those deep dives coming, and remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories are the ones we tell ourselves. Ever just find yourself scrolling through YouTube and you're like, wait, how does this person have thousands of followers?
Right.
Like, what?
Totally.
What's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, that's what today's deep dive is all about.
Yeah.
We're pulling back the curtain on internet fame.
That's right.
And we're using one streamer's content to kind of see how this whole thing works. You sent us this live stream, this guy who calls himself Deca.
Yeah.
And oh boy, is there
a lot
to unpack. he is like a digital anthropologist's like dream subject.
Okay.
Because Deca's not like this weird outlier, right? He actually represents a much larger trend.
Okay.
And his live stream, it's like a masterclass
Oh.
in how these online communities form.
Like a whole thing with parasocial relationships where, viewers feel like they actually know the person
Right.
behind the screen.
They're best friends,
Yeah, exactly.
even though they've never met.
Exactly. And the thing is, a lot of these creators, even the ones who are just like seemingly chatting,
Yeah.
they often have an angle, like they're working towards something.
See, I wouldn't even have thought of that.
Ugh.
I would just assume they're just being themselves. But that makes sense.
Yeah. And speaking of angles, Deca starts right from the get-go, like, hit that like button,
Yeah.
subscribe,
Huh.
become a member. All of that, it's like content is secondary.
This is first.
Exactly. And that's because for a lot of these creators, platforms like YouTube, they're not just a hobby, it's
Right.
how they make money.
That's their job.
Exactly. Every subscriber, that translates to potential income.
Uh-huh.
In fact, Deca even mentions the algorithm. Did you catch that?
Oh, yeah, multiple times, actually.
Right. So he's signaling that he understands how these platforms work,
Okay.
how content gets seen, how it gets promoted,
Okay.
which it makes you wonder, how much of this live stream is actually off the cuff.
Right. It's all planned out.
Exactly. Maybe he's crafting his content specifically to game the algorithm to get those views up.
It's like he's giving us a peek behind the wizard's curtain.
Exactly.
Speaking of wizards,
Yeah.
this live stream
Yeah.
has enough drama for a whole fantasy epic.
Oh, tell me about it.
He is calling out other YouTubers left and right.
Mhm.
We've got cyberbullies. We've got Mr. Christie.
It's like nonstop.
Yeah.
It's giving like major digital feud energy.
It is. It is.
And you know what? That's totally by design.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Because this whole us versus them mentality, that's how you build community online.
Oh, okay.
By creating these rivals, these enemies,
Right.
Deca's giving his followers a reason to band together, a reason to like rally behind him.
Okay. So it's like picking a side in the schoolyard,
Exactly.
but it's online.
Exactly. It's that same in-group, out-group dynamic, but it's amplified. It's global.
Global schoolyard.
Right. And the language he uses plays a huge part in that. He throws around words like trolls and
Haters, hypocrisy.
yes, and those terms, they're not just like random insults.
So they have like some specific meanings.
They carry a lot of weight within that online world. Like trolls aren't just annoying, they represent a threat.
Yeah.
To Deca's whole community, right? And when he calls out haters, he's not just complaining.
Right.
He's discrediting them, basically telling his followers, don't even listen to them.
Right. Like these opinions are irrelevant.
Exactly. And then hypocrisy, that's like the ultimate takedown.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that.
Like, he's saying his opponents have no moral high ground,
So he's trying to control the narrative, basically.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, this is my story and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, so it's all about control. But then it gets kind of blurry because he starts mixing in all this stuff about his personal life.
Yeah.
Like legal issues he's dealing with, relationship problems, even hints at mental health struggles.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's where things get really interesting because how much of what we're seeing is real
Yeah.
and how much of it is, carefully curated.
To get a reaction.
Exactly. Is Deca genuinely trying to connect with his audience?
Right.
Or is he just using his personal life as like content,
To get clicks.
Exactly. And it's a question we should be asking about a lot of what we see online.
It makes you wonder, what's the line
Exactly. Where does that line exist?
between being relatable and
Exploiting your own life
yeah.
for entertainment.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it like that.
It really is.
Like, how much are we really getting manipulated?
That's the question, isn't it?
That's a whole other can of worms, though.
It really is.
Yeah. And it's not just, his personal life. He also brings in some, pretty intense topics.
Yeah.
He keeps mentioning the establishment and even compares himself to, Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
And, I mean, if I remember it correctly, Savile was
Oh, yeah. Not a good dude.
not a role model.
No, not at all.
So why even bring him up?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because Deca's tapping into this whole online phenomenon. It's like the allure of conspiracy.
Okay.
By presenting himself as this underdog, battling these unseen forces.
Right.
He's playing into this narrative that really resonates with a lot of people online, this idea that there's more to the story.
There's a deeper truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, we're not getting the whole picture.
It's like he's building a whole mythology around himself.
Exactly. And he's the hero, obviously.
Of course, of course.
Fighting the good fight. And that actually ties into another theme we see a lot in his content, which is this emphasis on, like, physical strength and masculinity.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's constantly talking about how much he weighs. Did you catch that?
18 stone. Right.
Yeah. Which, if my math is right, is like over 250 pounds.
That's a lot. And then he's always going on about his workouts, how tough he is, all that.
Exactly. It's like he's cultivating this alpha male persona.
Right. Because he's trying to prove something.
Exactly. And it might seem kind of surface level, but it actually speaks to how these traditional ideas about masculinity are playing out online.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's about asserting dominance, but not necessarily through physical force, you know?
So, like, words are his weapons.
Exactly. It's about verbal sparring, being able to withstand criticism, always being in control, even when things get heated.
Which is weird because he's also, like, constantly trying to get attention.
Right.
But then he acts like he's too good for anyone who actually gives him attention, even the people he calls trolls.
It's that paradox I was talking about.
Oh, right, right.
Like, they need the attention, both positive and negative.
Because it keeps them relevant.
Exactly. It feeds the algorithm. But then
Yeah.
they also want to position themselves as, like, victims of that attention.
Oh, so it's like, pay attention to me, but don't you dare judge me.
Exactly. A very delicate balancing act, and we can't forget the financial side of all this.
Oh, right, the whole become a member, donate, buy my merch spiel.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, this is a business for Decca.
Yeah, I always forget about that.
Right. This isn't just him, like, venting or building a community. He's trying to make a living.
Which I get, but
Yeah.
it does make you wonder, like,
Yeah.
how much of what he's saying is actually real
Right.
and how much is, like, calculated to get those donations?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it really highlights why it's so important to be, like, a critical consumer of online content. Like,
Okay.
we can't just take everything at face value.
Yeah, we got to think for ourselves.
Exactly. We have to question people's motivations, recognize that there's often more going on than what's being said out loud.
So, like, don't check your skepticism at the digital door.
Exactly. And that goes beyond just Deca, right?
Right.
We have to be aware of our own biases as
Yeah.
viewers. Like, why are we drawn to certain personalities? What needs are being fulfilled for us in these online spaces?
It's an introspection time, folks.
Exactly. Now, there's one more point in my notes that I wanted to touch on before we move on.
Okay, yeah, what's that?
Deca seems to have this thing about anonymity. Like, he's really bothered by creators who don't show their faces.
Oh, yeah, he called out a few people for hiding behind their usernames.
Right. And it's just so interesting because here he is,
Yeah.
operating under a pseudonym, carefully crafting this online persona,
Mm-hmm.
but he's demanding authenticity from everyone else.
It's like he's saying, you can't judge me, you don't even know the real me, but then again, he's
Right.
out there putting his whole life on blast.
Yeah, or at least the version he wants us to see, which I think brings us to the really important part of all of this.
Okay, lay it on me.
This isn't just about Deca, right?
Yep. So what are you saying?
This is about, like, all of us. We're all just kind of trying to figure out this digital world.
Right, where it's like anyone can be anyone.
Exactly, where you can just present a completely different version of yourself.
And it's easy to get sucked in.
Oh, totally. Like, you get caught up in the drama, the personalities, this whole, like, exaggerated reality.
It's so constructed, though.
Totally. But that's the thing about the internet.
So where does that leave us?
Well,
I mean, what are we even supposed to do with all this?
think of it this way. What we just listened to with Deca,
Yeah.
that's like a crash course in media literacy.
Okay.
It's entertaining, don't get me wrong, but it's also, like, a huge warning sign.
Like, don't trust everything you see online.
Exactly. Everything's filtered. There's always an angle.
So we got to be more careful.
We have to be more discerning, more critical.
Don't just accept everything at face value.
Exactly. Ask questions, you know? Look for other perspectives.
Okay.
And maybe the most important thing,
Yeah.
be aware of your own role in this whole thing.
What do you mean?
Why are you drawn to certain content? What buttons are being pushed for you?
It's like we all need to do a self-audit.
Basically. Like, figure out what you're looking for online.
Don't get lost in the sauce.
Exactly.
It's so easy to get lost in the sauce.
It really is, especially these days.
Oh, for sure.
But hey, that's why we do these deep dives, right?
Right. To help make sense of it all.
Exactly.
Wow, tonight we really went deep.
We
We
did.
covered internet fame,
The algorithm,
online community,
and a whole 9 yards.
even like a little digital psychology.
We did. It was a journey,
It really was.
but a good one.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Always learning something new.
Always. And to everyone listening, next time you're about to click on that live stream or you're scrolling through that endless feed, just like take a second.
Yeah.
Remember Deca and all the stuff we talked about today?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what's the real story here?
And who's actually benefiting from my attention?
Good one.
Got to keep those questions front of mind.
Facts. And on that note, we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Can you ever really apologize for something publicly?
Yeah.
Like, once the whole internet's seen it, can you ever hit reset?
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of wondering about today.
Okay.
So buckle up, everyone, because today's deep dive is messy.
Yeah.
We're talking about a live stream transcript so raw, it makes a boxing match look like totally chill.
Wow. What's fascinating to me is, like you said, it's raw.
Right.
No script, no retakes, just like human interaction, but in the digital age.
It's like holding up a magnifying glass to the internet.
Sure.
And not just any humans. We're talking Deca and Liam.
Right.
These two UK YouTubers who are practically famous for their, well, online feuds. So, yeah, listener discretion is advised.
Right, yeah.
Things get a little spicy.
It's interesting because it goes beyond the online drama. Right? This deep dive is about like when online personas collide with real life.
Okay, I like that.
Public apologies, accusations, this whole feud, it all kind of blends together.
So let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
First up, Deca. This self-proclaimed ex-gangster turned, get this, YouTuber.
Okay.
He even has a podcast.
Does he really?
It's called The Official All or Nothing Podcast.
Wow, that's quite a title.
Right.
And even in the live stream, he's so blunt.
Oh, tell me about it.
Like even aggressive, you know?
It's all over the place. He's like, I'm just a normal lad, but then bam, threatening someone.
Exactly.
Or bragging about fights he's been in. It's wild.
And it gets even more complicated.
Oh, yeah.
Because he's got this criminal record.
Right.
He's got a sexual assault conviction that he talks about, but it just creates more tension.
Which leads us to our other YouTuber, Liam.
Okay.
Also, no stranger to online feuds.
Right.
But in this live stream, you can tell he is walking on eggshells. He's
Yeah.
trying to clear his name, but you can just tell this could blow up at any second.
He's in a tough spot.
For sure.
He wants to talk, set things straight, but you can tell he's thinking, is this a game to Deca?
Totally. Like, is this whole thing some kind of setup? And that's what makes this whole thing so captivating. It's this back and forth, this like controversy vortex. Liam's trying to get Deca to own up to stuff. And Deca, well, he's basically a master of deflection.
It's more than just deflecting though, right?
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
playing the victim, personal attacks, even just like changing the subject completely.
Oh, and it gets weird, like really weird. So picture this. Liam's trying to have a serious conversation. And Deca just comes out of nowhere talking about how he has, and I quote, harder shits than Liam. I know.
Wow, that's...
It's bizarre.
It is.
But it works. It shuts Liam down completely.
It's like he controls the whole conversation, even if it's with like cringy humor.
And it's that control that makes you question like his whole reformed thing, you know? He's calling out other YouTubers for being fake, but then he's doing the same thing.
It's like he wants to have it both ways.
Yeah.
He says he's changed, even apologizes for things, but then uses his past to shut down any conversation that's uncomfortable.
And don't even get me started on that sexual assault conviction. Yeah. He talks about it so casually, like it's no big deal.
It's so uncomfortable to listen to. Like, he uses phrases like slapped her ass or propositioned her for sex.
I know.
As if it's nothing.
It's really disturbing. And then when Liam tries to say something about it,
what happens?
The live stream glitches out. Cuts him off completely.
Oh, come on.
Talk about suspicious timing.
Right. It makes you wonder, was that real or was that Deca controlling things again?
Exactly. It's like, where does Deca's online persona end and the real him begin?
It all gets so blurry.
It does. And that's where things get really interesting and honestly, a little scary. It's crazy, right? Like we build these online personas, these versions of ourselves.
Yeah.
But then what happens when that image doesn't match up with reality?
And with Deca, it's like, he's constantly trying to balance things out. He wants to be the reformed, tough guy, the guy making documentaries about knife crime.
Right.
But then his actions don't always line up.
It's like he wants to have it both ways, you know?
Exactly.
He'll admit to his past, even apologize for some of it.
Right.
But then he uses that same past to shut down anything that makes him uncomfortable.
And that's where the whole harder shits thing comes in?
Yeah.
As ridiculous as it sounds,
Oh, totally.
it's not just about being shocking.
Yeah.
It's about him showing he's in control.
Like, this is my show. We're talking about what I want to talk about.
Exactly.
Which again makes you wonder about the reformed thing.
Right.
He's out here calling everyone else fake, but he's doing the same thing.
It's a pattern you see everywhere, not just online.
Oh, for sure.
People trying to run from their past, but ending up making the same mistakes.
It's like he's using his past as a shield, but also as a weapon.
100%.
He can say he's being transparent by bringing it up,
Yeah.
but if you question his version of events, boom, you're attacking him.
It's a way to shut down the conversation. Avoid taking responsibility.
Like when Liam tries to ask about when Dea found out about his past,
Yeah.
Dea just attacks him, saying he's stirring up drama.
Classic deflection.
And then when Liam tries to actually talk about the assault, Dea downplays the whole thing, uses like the most insensitive language.
It's hard to listen to.
It is. And it's not even the first time he's been aggressive like this.
What do you mean?
Remember how he talked about those fights he was in? Or when he threatened that other YouTuber? There's just this constant aggression, like he needs to be in control.
And that's what's so unsettling about this whole thing.
Totally.
It reminds us that what we see online, these personas,
Right.
they don't erase what happens in real life.
And sometimes it feels like those online personas are just a way to hide from it.
Exactly.
To hide from who you really are, what you've done.
It makes you wonder how often this happens, you know?
Oh, yeah.
How often do we buy into someone's online persona without really seeing the person behind it?
It's a good question. And it makes you think about Liam, too.
Right.
He came into this wanting to clear the air, have a real conversation.
Yeah.
And instead, he's walking on eggshells, trying not to set Dea off.
It's because Dea has all the power in this situation.
Right.
He's the one with the platform, the audience.
It's like he enjoys the conflict, the drama of it all.
And as messed up as it sounds, that's what makes it so hard to look away.
Like a car crash. You know it's bad, but you can't help but watch.
Exactly. But it's easy to forget that there are real people involved here.
Totally.
Real lives being affected.
This isn't just some show. The stakes are real for Liam. It's easy to forget, you know, that there's like a real person on the other side of the screen.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in the online world and forget that these are real people with real lives being impacted.
And Liam's a perfect example of that.
He is. Just because it's online doesn't mean it doesn't hurt.
Exactly. And it makes you think about who has the power in these situations.
Right. Like, who's controlling the narrative?
Dea, with his platform and this whole persona he's built up. Right. Liam's just trying to defend himself and salvage what's left of his reputation.
It's tough. Online visibility is a double-edged sword, you know. It's great to have a voice, connect with people,
For sure.
but it also makes you vulnerable. One minute you're just talking,
Right.
and the next you've got thousands of people judging you.
It's a lot to handle, for sure. And it's like, who can you even trust online anymore? Everyone's got these carefully crafted personas.
It's true. You have to remind yourself that there's a real person behind those posts.
It's so easy to get wrapped up in the drama of it all.
It is. It's like that saying, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah.
You've got to be skeptical.
So what's the takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's about being aware. Aware of how these platforms work, how the lines between online and real life are blurred, and our role in it all. Like, we're not just bystanders.
Exactly. We can't just passively watch this stuff. We have to think critically, you know? Question what we're seeing. Remember, there are real consequences to all of this.
Well said. This deep dive, it wasn't just about Dea and Liam.
Totally.
It was about us, too. How we interact with the online world.
Because it does affect us, whether we realize it or not.
It does.
This was a lot.
It was.
Yeah.
A lot to think about, for sure. But that's what a good deep dive does.
Exactly. Leaves you with more questions than answers.
And hopefully a new perspective on things.
For sure. So to everyone listening, next time you're watching a video about some online feud, remember this conversation.
Remember the people behind the screens.
Yeah.
The power dynamics. And most importantly, your role in it all.
And on that note, it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride through the underbelly of UK YouTube.
Until next time.
Happy diving!
Okay, so are you ready? All right, so get ready to dive into some serious pre-fight mind games with this one.
Oh, yeah?
This is Decca Heggie we're talking about.
Yeah.
Bare-knuckle boxing champ.
Right.
Going up against the shadow boxer. A YouTuber trying to make a name for himself.
Yeah.
And honestly, this interview you sent in,
Mm-hmm.
it is absolutely wild.
Yeah.
But we're going beyond the trash talk here.
Absolutely.
You're trying to figure out what this tells us about, like, the fight game today,
Yeah.
you know?
I think it's a really fascinating look at the clash between that old school, like, boxing mentality and then sort of the new world of online hype and, you know, and just spectacle.
Because you've got Heggie, he's all, like, you know, grit, experience years in the ring.
Blood, sweat, and tears.
Exactly. And then you got the shadow boxer. He's coming in hot with this whole self-promotion angle.
Yeah.
Like, right off the bat, he calls this whole thing the biggest train robbery in boxing.
It's amazing.
Claims Heggie's getting played just by showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Party's like, is this guy serious?
Yeah.
But there's this weird, like, undercurrent where it's almost like he's trying to convince himself as much as Heggie.
I think that's what's so brilliant about it, right? Because on the one hand, he's playing this, like, David versus Goliath role.
The underdog.
Yeah. Even though he clearly understands, like, the money to be made here, you know, he's got this online following.
Right.
But by constantly saying Heggie's making a mistake, it's like he's subtly shifting the pressure onto the champ. Right. It's like psychological warfare.
Wow.
But it's like aimed at the business side of things, too.
Yeah.
You know?
And it gets, honestly, kind of uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he brings up dormant steroid Jews' heads that he's knocked out, implying Heggie's never been in a real fight.
Right.
And you could practically see Heggie, like, biting back a retort.
Yeah.
But for the most part, he keeps it together.
He does, and that's the thing. Composure is key in these situations.
Right.
Because remember, this is all, you know...
Gamesmanship.
Yeah, it's tactics. They're both trying to get in each other's heads before they even step in the ring.
Yeah.
And the shadow boxer, even if he is, you know, being a bit of a jerk, he knows how to push buttons.
Oh, he knows exactly what he's doing.
He does.
Because then he starts in on how he's not getting drug tested.
Right.
He even admits to taking testosterone, which, by the way, is allowed in this fight. But he's doing it to get under Heggie's skin, because Heggie's always been about clean fighting.
Totally. And it plays into this whole narrative that he's trying to build.
Right.
Right? Like, Heggie represents the old guard, you know, stuck in his ways.
Nice.
Yeah, bound by tradition.
Yeah.
And the shadow boxer is this, you know, disruptive force who's willing to bend the rules.
Right.
Now, whether that's genuine or just part of his persona, that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But it's definitely working, right? Like, it's getting people talking.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he knows how to play to an audience.
He does.
Like, he throws out these lines like, how much should the pay-per-view cost?
Smart.
Directly to the viewers.
Yeah, yeah.
Bringing them into this whole spectacle.
It's very meta.
It is. And then there's this weird moment where he gets kind of patriotic.
Right.
Starts talking about the whole country coming to Thailand.
Chuckles.
Throws in a God Save the Queen.
Oh.
What's that about?
Well, it's actually a classic tactic, right? He's tapping into this idea of national pride.
Okay.
You know, positioning himself as the people's champ, fighting for something bigger than himself.
Right.
And it's a way to broaden his appeal, you know, connect with viewers on an emotional level.
Huh, interesting.
And you see this time and time again in boxing, especially leading up to a big fight.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So we've got, like, this shrewd businessman, master manipulator, and a patriot.
It's a lot.
This is a lot to unpack.
It is.
And we haven't even gotten to, like, how they're actually going to fight yet.
I know, right? But you know what's interesting?
What's that?
Even with all the bluster, you actually start to see their fight plans come out a bit.
Oh, yeah.
You know, tucked in there.
Yeah, like, Heggie, even though he's being kind of quiet, he does start hinting at how he thinks this is going to go down.
He does.
Says something like, my punches, they just get stronger as the fight goes on.
It's true.
Almost like he's saying, good luck knocking me out in the first round, buddy.
Right, right. Because what's he going to do if he can't put Heggie away early?
Exactly.
And then even more telling, he's listing off these combos, right? Jab, left, right hook, right, uppercut.
And he just rattles it off like it's nothing.
Right. But that's the thing. That's not just him bragging about how tough he is.
So what is he doing?
He's laying out his strategy, plain as day. That combination, that's all about wearing someone down. Exactly. He's known for it. His relentless pace is going to try to drag the shadow boxer into deep water, see if he sinks or swims.
Which makes sense, especially since the shadow boxer himself even says, like, his cardio might be a weakness.
Right. He's putting all his eggs in the first round knockout basket.
Says, if you don't get me out in the first round, I can take you down the stretch.
But that's a big if.
Huge if.
Right. It's like he knows deep down, he needs that haymaker early.
Because
The longer it goes, advantage Heggie 100%.
Okay, so classic matchup then, right?
Yeah.
You got the veteran playing the long game
Right.
versus the young upstart who needs that quick win.
Absolutely. But then there's that other layer.
What's that?
The self-promotion game.
Oh, right.
The shadow boxer. He never misses a beat. Plugging his channel, his concrete hands bit, the whole thing.
It's true. Every other sentence is like, subscribe, like, follow me.
He gets it though, right?
Mhm.
He understands, like, these days, being a fighter isn't enough.
It's a business.
It's a brand, gotta be an entertainer, a personality, the whole 9 yards.
Love it or hate it, you got to respect the hustle, I guess.
Exactly, and he's good at it.
Oh, he's great at it.
He knows what he's doing.
Because then he goes on this whole thing comparing himself to Jesus Christ.
Right. Out of nowhere.
I mean, talk about over the top.
But again, don't underestimate that shock value.
It gets people talking.
Exactly. Keeps him guessing, are they supposed to take him seriously?
Is it all a joke?
Right, but that's the point, all that buzz. It's views, followers, sponsors.
He's playing a different game.
Oh, he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
And just when you think you figured him out, he drops this bomb.
Oh, what's that?
He says this could be his last fight.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, claims that if he beats Heggie, that's it. He's out, retiring on top.
Wow.
So now it's not just about winning or losing, it's legacy, right?
Yeah.
Going out on his own terms,
good.
the whole 9 yards.
Because even if he loses...
He already said he was thinking about retiring.
Exactly. Softens the blow, controls the narrative again.
This guy's playing 4D chess,
He is.
and I'm not sure Heggie even knows what game they're playing.
But like we said, that's the shadow boxer's whole thing, right?
Thrives on chaos.
Exactly. Got to keep everyone guessing, even if it means, like, we don't know what's real, what's performance anymore.
It's all part of the show.
100%. So how do you even fight someone like that?
Yeah, how do you prepare for a guy who's just making it up as he goes along?
$1,000,000 question, right? And it gets to the heart of why this whole thing is so fascinating.
Because, let's be real, for all the talk, all the mind games,
Mm-hmm.
these guys are still going to step in the ring
They are.
and throw down.
Yep.
But before we get into that, we got to talk about these claims the shadow boxer is making. Right? Because this is Decca Heggie we're talking about. He's no slouch.
Exactly. He's the champ for a reason.
So is the shadow boxer for real, or is it all hype? Because he really doesn't hold back at all, does he?
Nope, not even a little bit.
At one point, he just comes out and says, I don't think I can be beaten 100% fit.
Right.
Then it's comparing himself to a Premier League fighter, putting Heggie down in, like, Division 3.
It's masterful, honestly.
Is this guy for real?
Well, whether he believes it or not, the tactic is brilliant.
How so?
He's using humor, these little pop culture references.
Right.
It's disarming, and it lands, especially with a younger audience online. They eat that up.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
And for Heggie, who's coming from this, like, old school boxing world.
Yeah, more traditional.
Exactly. It's got to be jarring. Like, how do you even respond to that?
You're right. It's like two totally different worlds colliding.
100%.
And the insults, they just keep on coming.
Oh, yeah, he's relentless.
Driving Heggie into the ground, breaking his jaw. Even comparing himself to a fine-tuned tiger.
But see, it's not just trash talk.
What do you mean?
There's a method to the madness. He's constantly hitting that point that he's the future of fighting.
Evolution, not revolution.
Exactly. And then there's that weird bit about the ladyboys.
Yeah, I had to rewind that part a few times.
Right.
Like, what is he even talking about?
It doesn't matter.
It does.
The point is to throw Heggie off to get a reaction.
And the fact that Heggie doesn't take the bait.
That actually works in his favor.
Yeah.
Shows he's not letting the shadow boxer get to him.
Right, keeping his composure.
Exactly. This whole thing hinges on what happens between their ears just as much as what happens,
In the ring.
Yeah.
And then that's it. The interview just ends.
No way, seriously.
It cuts off mid-sentence.
So abrupt.
Like it was staged almost.
Right, like they planned it.
Leaving us wanting more, wondering what else they were going to say.
Which, let's be real, knowing the
Those
shadow
are
boxer.
plan all along.
Oh, 100%. He knows how to work an audience, even when they're not in the room.
So what does this all really tell us at the end of the day?
I think the takeaway here is that we can break down the trash talk, look at the strategies.
Right.
But what the shadow boxer understands better than maybe anyone is the power of the narrative.
The story.
Yes, and love him or hate him, he's already changed the conversation, made it impossible to ignore him.
He's playing chess while everyone else is still setting up the checkers.
Exactly, and that's what makes him so dangerous.
So next time you're watching any competition,
This isn't just about fighting,
Now pay attention to what's going on outside the ring, the field, the boardroom.
where the real game is being played.
Because sometimes that's where the real fight is won or lost.
100%.
This has been a wild one.
Tuckles. Tell me about it.
Thanks for deep diving into this with me.
Anytime, man.
We'll catch you all in the next one. All right, so get this. We're diving into a story. YouTube fight clubs, controversial guests, bad decisions. You name it.
This one really makes you think about online personalities and like who they really are when the cameras are off.
Yeah, this is from that Central Club interview on YouTube where the host gets way more than he bargained for with this guest, Decca Heggie.
Decca Heggie, big name in the YouTube fight scene, known for, shall we say, being a bit of a loose cannon.
You can say that again. So the Central Club host, he knows this guy, Darren G, right? And Darren is really into this whole fight world. He's the one who tells the host, dude, you have to get Decca Heggie on your show. It'll be amazing.
And the host probably thought this is going to be my big break. I can already see the clicks.
Right. And I mean, who wouldn't want more viewers?
Totally. But that's where you got to watch out, because big personalities often come with big red flags. And in this case, one of those red flags is Decca Heggie's history of, well, not exactly being reliable, let's say.
Yeah, this guy's the king of cancellations. He bailed on the interview like 3 times.
3 times? I mean, come on, think about the host's time, the effort, the money wasted. That kind of disregard, even before they've met face-to-face, it speaks volumes.
It's not like it was easy to reschedule either. This was during a huge rugby weekend in Cardiff.
Oh, wow. So the city's packed hotels are booked solid talk about adding stress to the situation.
Exactly. I can't even imagine trying to navigate that kind of chaos.
Yeah.
But the host, he's determined to make it work. Rents a camper van for Decca to stay and plans out activities, even offers to take him to the rugby match.
Wow, going above and beyond. Maybe even overcompensating a little. It's like he felt the need to appease Decca.
Yeah, maybe. There's definitely a sense of like, I can handle anything naivete going on here.
Yeah.
Little does he know.
Little does he know what he's got himself into. This is just the tip of the iceberg. So Decca's on the train to Cardiff, right? And he decides to give the host a call.
As you do.
And with every call, it's becoming clearer and clearer.
This guy, Decca, he's been hitting the miniature bar a little too hard.
Oh, yeah. Those little bottles of whiskey were no match for Decca. But the crazy part is, even though he's, a little toasted and known for being, well, a bit much, he actually seemed to really enjoy himself at the rugby match.
It's weird, right? This guy lives for online drama, controversy, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
But put him in a crowd of rugby fans.
Yeah.
He's just one of the lads having a good time.
Yeah.
Maybe the miniatures had something to do with it, too.
Maybe. But that little glimpse of normalcy, yeah, it doesn't last long. After the match, the host is probably thinking, time to wind down. I know I would be.
Yeah, but not Decca. They go back to the host's parents' house, and guess what?
Let me guess, another rugby match broke out.
Close. An after party is in full swing.
Oh boy, adding fuel to the fire? Why does that not surprise me?
And keep in mind, the host has other interviews lined up.
Yeah.
He needs things to go smoothly. But Decca clearly missed the memo.
This is where all those red flags we talked about, the cancellations, the pre-gaming on the train, it starts to make more sense. At this party, Decca starts making some comments to the host's aunt, and let's just say they weren't exactly appropriate.
Yeah, at the time, he was kind of brushed off like, oh, Decca's had a bit too much to drink. You know how it is.
Yeah.
But looking back, knowing what we know now, it's kind of creepy. It's like a little warning sign of what's to come.
It's easy to miss those signs, especially at a party. But they're there for a reason. And as the night goes on, things escalate. Decca's getting handsy, making people uncomfortable. And then there's the incident with the dog.
This is where it gets really bad. I gotta warn you.
Oh, no.
The host's in bed at this point, sound asleep. He has no clue what's going downstairs.
It just goes to show you the host had this image in his head of Decca.
Right.
Like a wild but harmless guy. He had no idea how bad it could actually get.
It's like we were talking about before, online personas versus reality. Sometimes we forget there's a whole other side of the story.
Big time. And in this case, the other side of the story is about to come crashing down.
So it's like 6 a.m. I'm out cold. My girlfriend wakes me up, freaking out. Your phone's been blowing up all night. Your family.
Yikes. Talk about a way to start the day.
Right. And remember how my dad was so chill about Decca even after all the cancellations and weird vibes? Yeah, well, now he's leaving me voicemails calling Decca a total psycho, telling you to get home ASAP.
Oh boy, the tide is turning.
Big time. And my mom. My mom, who's the sweetest, most patient person you'll ever meet. She's using words I've never even heard her say before. Turns out Decca's been arrested.
Seriously?
Yeah, and suddenly I'm drowning in this wave of emotions.
Yeah.
anger at Decca for sure,
Mm-hmm.
but also this huge sense of responsibility. Like I brought this guy into our lives and it blew up in my face.
So what do? Do you try to salvage the interview, distance yourself completely?
Right. It was a mess. Part of me wanted to just crawl back into bed and pretend this was all a bad dream. But I knew I had to deal with it. So I go to the police station to drop off Decca's stuff, thinking that's that.
Mm-hmm.
But then the police call, and they're like, yeah, Decca's asking for you.
Wait, really? He's asking for you?
I know, right?
Really?
Like, we're best mates, and this is just a little misunderstanding. And get this, the police, they know Decca, and not just his name.
Mm.
They've dealt with him before.
So this isn't just a case of a loud, obnoxious guest. This is something way more serious.
Exactly. It's like that thing we were talking about, online personas versus reality. They can be so convincing, so carefully crafted, that we forget there's a whole other side.
A side you don't see coming until it's too late.
Tell me about it. So I'm freaking out, but I still do the interview with Decca, trying to keep it together with my head spinning with all this other stuff. After I drop him back off, I finally hear the truth from my friends who were at the party that night. Remember how we talked about Decca acting weird with the dog?
Yeah.
It was bad.
Yeah.
Like way worse than I could have ever imagined. I can't even repeat it here.
Wow. And it wasn't just that, right? The comments to your aunt, the way he treated your parents, it's like a switch flipped.
Exactly. And honestly, I'm just relieved my brother wasn't there. He's got a bit of a temper, and things could have gotten really ugly.
Yeah, things definitely could have escalated quickly.
It messed me up for a while.
Yeah.
You know, you think you know someone, and then they do something like that.
Yeah.
It makes you question your own judgment.
I can only imagine. And you stayed silent about it for a long time. Why was that?
Part of it was just not wanting to relive it, you know? It was a really tough experience, but there was also this weird guilt I felt. Like I was partially responsible for bringing this guy into our lives.
Because you were the one who invited him on the show.
Yeah, and I know some people would have milked this whole thing for views, released the interview right away, and watched the drama unfold.
It's easy to get caught up in the numbers game, but it sounds like you made the right call.
I hope so. But it's tough because, yeah, it's content, but it's also real life with real consequences. And I think that's what I want people to take away from this whole thing. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of online personalities, but we have to remember there's a real person behind that screen. And sometimes those red flags we see, they're not just quirks, they're warning signs.
Yeah. It's a good reminder for all of us to be a little more critical, a little more discerning about who we choose to follow and support online.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about entertainment. It's about accountability, responsibility, and understanding that our choices have real-world consequences.
Well said. I think that's a good place to leave it. A lot to think about, for sure.
For sure. Thanks for diving into this with me.
Kenny.
Okay, so get this right. Dirty Decca, this UK podcaster, he's gone, like totally nuclear online. And it is wild. Accusations, raw emotion, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we're diving into this whole thing, this YouTube video. And even the title is intense, like, quote, Dirty Decca Heggie and Ron Swanson,
Right.
end quote. But it has boxing gloves and one of those exploding head emojis.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Yikes.
Like, buckle up, right? This is going to be good. But here's the thing. It's not just like, some random drama. Decca, he's really laying bare some, like, deep stuff about building a career online these days.
Right. And what's so fascinating about this is that we're seeing this raw, unfiltered side of him. This isn't some carefully crafted persona. It's raw emotion. And it really makes you think about the pressures these creators face that need to be constantly on, you know?
Yeah. And it's like this glimpse behind the curtain, right? And Decca is holding nothing back. He's talking about feeling betrayed by people he thought were friends, online trolls, just this feeling of constant attack.
Yeah.
It's intense. He even mentioned this recorded conversation with someone named Ron Swanson. That seems to be at the heart of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. See, this kind of thing, it highlights something really important about online spaces. These kinds of disputes, they're more common than you might think. You've got content theft, personal disagreements, just this constant pressure to stand out, to grow your audience. It's a breeding ground for conflict, you know?
Totally. And social media, it just throws gasoline on that fire.
Absolutely.
And you can hear in Decca's voice, like, the frustration, the hurt, it's palpable. There's even this part where he's like, do they want me to commit suicide? Which, honestly, that's really concerning.
Yeah. It's a really dark side to all of this. That statement really highlights the mental toll this online harassment takes, this constant feeling of being attacked from all sides. it's exhausting. And when it spills over into your personal life, your relationships, your mental health, that's when it goes from online drama to something much more serious.
It's true. And to make things even more like layered, Decca's not giving specifics. He mentions these expose videos and trying to clear his name.
No, or missing pieces.
Yeah. We're missing pieces of the puzzle.
It's like we're only getting one side of the story, which is so often the case online. We get these raw emotions, but no context. It's a good reminder to be careful about jumping to conclusions, right? When we only have part of the story.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what's the full picture here? You know, Decca, he talks about people like digging into his past, spreading rumors, just trying to ruin his reputation. It's like he feels under attack from all sides.
And that feeling, that constant scrutiny, judgment, it's incredibly isolating, isn't it?
It is.
This constant fear that someone's always watching, waiting for you to mess up, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Okay, but here's what I find really interesting. On the one hand, Decca's asking to be left alone, talking about the negativity. But then on the other hand, he's using some pretty harsh language himself, calling people bums and bastards. It's a little contradictory. Right?
Absolutely. And it speaks to this weird paradox of online life, doesn't it? Like, we crave authenticity, but get so easily sucked into the drama and negativity. It's like these platforms, they're designed to make our voices louder, but sometimes that amplification makes us come across as more aggressive than we mean to, you know?
So true. Okay, so zooming out for a sec, what does all this say about the world of podcasting in general? Is this level of drama just part of the game?
It's a good question, and while I wouldn't say this is an everyday occurrence, Decca's experience does reflect some of the challenges of building a career online, especially in a place like the UK. The podcasting scene there is different.
Oh, how so?
Well, for one, the UK's podcasting scene is super crowded, right? You've got tons of people all vying for listeners. That creates pressure, and unfortunately, sometimes that pressure boils over.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's like this pressure cooker of talent and ambition. Everyone's fighting for their space.
Exactly. Decca's outburst, it's unsettling, but it is a reminder that even online, it's still real people with real emotions. And online, those emotions can get amplified, sometimes with real-world consequences.
Totally. Like we see those curated online personas, but there's a whole person behind them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like Decca's reached his breaking point.
It seems that way, yeah.
You know, when Decca was talking about wanting to be left alone, it really got me thinking, like, is true privacy even possible these days?
Yeah.
Especially online.
Right.
It feels like the more connected we all are, the harder it is to hold on to any privacy.
It's such a paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
We want connection, right? To share our lives, be part of communities, but that comes at a price, and that price is often our privacy.
Exactly. And it's not even just about what we're putting out there ourselves.
Yeah.
You know? It's all the data that's collected about us behind the scenes, tracked, analyzed, traded.
Yeah.
It's like we're always being watched, categorized, and like commodified.
You're right. And that constant feeling of surveillance, it creates this unease, this pressure to always be on, to perform. I think it keeps us from truly being ourselves online.
It's like living in a digital panopticon, you know, always under scrutiny.
Yes, and that's what makes Decca's story so interesting. He's right in the middle of it all, this struggle between being authentic and wanting to protect himself.
Totally. He's open, he's vulnerable with his audience, and he keeps getting burned. It makes you wonder, when does being authentic become self-destructive?
It's a question we all have to ask ourselves these days, you know? Whether you're a public figure or just someone who uses social media, finding that balance, it's tricky.
It really is. And honestly, it's bigger than just us as individuals, too. The platforms we're using, those algorithms, they're designed to keep us engaged, even if it's bad for us.
Totally. I mean, these companies have a responsibility to make their spaces safer, to empower users, not exploit them.
Right. There's this part where Decca says he thinks the people coming after him get off on it. He actually calls them bullies, which is, I mean, is that fair? Is it really bullying if it's happening online?
It's a tough question. I think the internet makes it harder to define traditional bullying. But here's the thing. Words have power. Doesn't matter if they're spoken or typed. If the intent is to hurt, intimidate, silence someone, I think you can absolutely call that bullying.
You're right. It's easy to forget there's a real person behind the screen. That anonymity can make us pretty callous.
It's true. We forget that everyone online, they have their own lives, feelings, struggles.
And you know what I've been thinking about? What about the people watching this unfold? The followers, the commenters, those who share the posts?
Yeah.
We're not off the hook here, are we?
Not at all. Our likes, our shares, we all contribute to this ecosystem of online drama. Every time we engage, it tells the platforms, give us more of this.
It's like this giant feedback loop of negativity.
Exactly. So we have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Be mindful of what we consume and how we engage with it. We need to be more critical, more empathetic.
You're right. Instead of jumping to share or leave a snarky comment,
Mhm.
maybe we just take a beat. Ask ourselves, are we part of the problem or part of the solution?
100%. We need to be a force for good online. Be more compassionate. Create a better digital space. Remember, words have power, and we can choose to use them to lift each other up.
So well said.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned the UK podcasting scene being especially competitive. What makes it different from other places, like here in the US, for example?
Well, the UK has this long history with audio storytelling, right? Think
Yeah.
radio dramas, comedy shows, they're already primed for audio content.
That's true.
And the UK is small, geographically speaking, so it's like everyone is competing for the same pool of listeners.
It's a smaller pond, but with a lot of big fish.
Exactly. And in that environment, you have to stand out. You have to hustle. It creates a lot of pressure, which can be both exciting and, well, we're seeing how it can go wrong.
Yeah. And Decca, he's made a career of being outspoken, pushing boundaries.
Right, but that's a tightrope walk, especially online. One wrong step
And it's all over the internet.
Exactly.
It's interesting, though, because even though he's out there, Decca also seems to really dislike the business side of things. Like, he said he hates always having to grow his audience, get sponsorships, all of that.
Well, that's the eternal struggle for artists, isn't it? Art versus commerce. You want to create authentically, but you also have to make a living.
It's true. It's a balancing act. Okay, but there's one more thing that really stood out to me. Decca keeps mentioning this enhanced DBS he's waiting for. He's adamant about getting it, making it public, even though his family is advising against it. What is that about?
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
interesting. It shows how our online and offline lives are inseparable now. So a DBS check, it's basically a background check required for certain jobs in the UK, especially anything involving children or vulnerable adults.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So for Decca to bring it up publicly like this, whatever he's facing must be serious.
Definitely raises the stakes. It also makes you think about this whole idea of online transparency. There's this expectation, especially for someone in the public eye, to be open about everything. But that can backfire, especially with sensitive information.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
like, what do you do? Do you address it head on and risk more scrutiny?
Mm,
Or stay silent and let the rumors run wild? There's no winning, is there?
right. It highlights this strange thing where our online selves can feel separate from our real lives, but then they collide and, well, it gets messy.
We're all living these double lives now,
Yeah.
anyway. Online personas, carefully curated. But behind that, we're all just figuring it out as we go.
Exactly. We're all just messy, complicated people trying to find our way.
That's the truth. So we've talked about a lot here. The pressures of life online, the
Yeah.
wild world of UK podcasting. What's the takeaway for people? What can we learn from Decca's story?
Those are the big questions, right? I don't know if there's an easy answer, but I do think Deca's experience is a chance for all of us to look at how we behave online. Are we being the best versions of ourselves?
It's a call to action, for sure, to create a digital world with more compassion, more empathy.
Exactly. And that starts with each of us making that choice.
You know, it's funny, right? Decca's story is like this weird microcosm of the whole online world.
Mm-hmm.
The good, the bad, the pressure, I don't know, it just makes you think,
I know exactly what you mean. So we're all still figuring out the rules of this digital age.
Totally. And the rules are changing every 5 minutes. It's exhausting. Like,
Yeah.
be authentic, but also don't you dare say the wrong thing.
Exactly. 1 minute, it's all about being real. The next, you're getting canceled for something you said years ago. It's like, how can anyone keep up?
Right. And it creates this culture where everyone's terrified to speak their minds.
Absolutely. It's this fear of making a mistake, of being judged. And it pushes us all further away from the authenticity we claim to want.
It's so true.
Yeah.
And Decca, he sees it. He hates this whole thing of having to build his brand, grow his audience, all of that. But at the same time, he's trapped in it, like all of us.
It's that classic push and pull. Be true to yourself, but also play the game, get those followers. It's like, what do you even choose?
And the more successful you get, the bigger the target on your back, right? It's
Yeah.
like people are almost waiting for you to mess up.
Oh, totally. There's definitely a bit of schadenfreude going on there. That feeling of, see?
Yeah.
They're not so perfect after all.
I know. It's kind of messed up when you really think about it. But I guess that's just part of being human, huh?
Yeah.
Capable of amazing things, but also a little bit cruel sometimes.
That's it, right. The highs and lows of humanity. And I think that's why Decca's story resonates. It's a reflection of all our complexities, our own contradictions.
It's a cautionary tale, for sure. Be careful what you wish for, because online fame has a dark side.
And honestly, it's bigger than just fame. It's about how we exist in this online space, how to be ourselves, but also protect ourselves, the need for connection, but also the importance of privacy. It's a lot.
So where do we go from here? How do we create a better, kinder digital world? One where we can actually, be ourselves without fear?
Honestly, I don't know if there's a single answer, but I do think it starts with us, each of us making a conscious choice to be better. Think before we post, be respectful, choose empathy.
That sounds pretty idealistic.
Maybe, but the online world is here to stay, right?
Yeah.
It's part of our lives now, so we have to at least try to make it a place that reflects the best of us, not the worst.
Reclaiming the human in the digital. I love that. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. It's been quite the journey.
It has.
From the wild world of Dirty Decca all the way to the meaning of life. Almost. But seriously, thanks to everyone for listening and for, well, thinking about all of this with us. It's been a good one. Right, so today we're diving into a world that's pretty wild, really British bare-knuckle boxing.
Yeah.
But we're not just looking at the sport, right?
Right.
We're trying to understand this guy, Decca Heggie.
Yeah.
He's all over YouTube, this channel, Hedgehog Live.
Okay.
And, well, let me tell you, this guy, he's
Yeah.
a piece of work, this Decca Heggie.
It's fascinating, isn't it? This persona that he's cultivated.
Yeah.
It's almost like a character,
Yeah.
And it clashes so dramatically with these little glimpses we get
Totally.
of his insecurities.
Yeah, it's like he's decided tough guy. That's the role he's playing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Constantly going on about how he's undefeated, the hardest man in Britain, even calls himself the governor. I mean,
Right.
who does that?
Yeah. It's a calculated move, though, right? I mean, when you think about it,
Yeah.
by claiming that title,
Yeah.
he's putting himself in this lineage,
Definitely.
with these, legendary figures like Lenny McLean, Roy Shaw.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if he's earned it or not. It's about establishing that dominance, that
Right.
authority.
And then he throws in these curveballs.
Yes.
He'll be talking about how he had a really rough childhood.
Yeah.
Mentions like sexual abuse, even
Right.
suicide attempts.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he's like, oh, but I'm actually really insecure.
Yeah.
I don't trust people. I want a stable relationship.
It's jarring, isn't it?
It is. It's really jarring.
Because you sit there and you think, okay, are these admissions genuine?
Yeah.
Is he actually trying to connect with people, trying to be vulnerable?
Yeah.
Or is this calculated? Is this a way to gain sympathy?
Oh, totally.
Build trust so that he can exploit it later?
Yeah. And then we get to Stephanie.
Oh, boy.
These phone calls,
Talk about
they are something else.
toxic masculinity.
Honestly, it's like a crash course in toxic masculinity.
Absolutely.
He goes back and forth between like showering her with affection,
Yeah.
almost like love bombing her, and then just berating her for like the smallest thing.
It's the slightest little thing.
And he demands constant attention, tells her who she can and can't talk to.
Control. It's all about control.
It's like he wants a girlfriend who's basically just an extension of himself,
Exactly.
not a real person with thoughts and feelings.
100%.
Remember that bit where he just loses it?
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
Because Stephanie says she thinks some guy on TV is good looking.
Oh, come on.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Normal people do that all the time.
Right. Like complimenting someone's appearance, that's allowed.
Exactly.
But he twists it around, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Makes it seem like she's attracted to this random guy just
Yeah.
because she said that he was good looking.
Yep.
Classic gaslighting.
Totally.
Making her doubt her own perceptions and
Yeah.
feel guilty for something totally normal.
And then he gets on to her past relationships,
Oh, here we go.
like fixated on it.
Yeah.
He brings up how she's only been with 3 guys.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Right. Like it's some kind of ammunition he can use against her.
Yeah, like it's a bad thing or
Mm.
something.
It's all about asserting his dominance,
Right.
implying that he's superior because of his own, alleged experience. Yeah.
And this is where the contradiction really hits you.
Yeah.
Because he says he respects women,
Right.
but then he tries to shame her for her past,
Exactly.
even though he's the one always bringing it up.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
It really doesn't.
And speaking of, respecting women,
Yeah?
did you hear about the story about his ex-girlfriend?
No. What happened?
So he wasn't cool with her even looking at other men.
Seriously?
Not even, pictures in magazines.
Wow.
He admits to ripping up a magazine
No way!
because she said another guy was attractive.
That's just unbelievable.
It's really something.
It's this pattern, isn't it?
It is.
This need to control, this possessiveness.
Yeah.
He doesn't see women as like individual people,
Right.
with their own thoughts and feelings and agency.
Exactly.
It's like they're possessions to be controlled.
Exactly.
But then he talks about his Nana.
Oh, here we go.
How much he loves her, how he goes to bingo with her every week.
Right. It's like he flips a switch.
It's almost comical.
Right. It's just contradiction after contradiction.
It really is.
He's trying to present this image of himself as this loving grandson.
Yeah.
But then his behavior towards women he's actually involved with
Right.
tells a completely different story.
It really makes you wonder.
It does.
Which one is the truth?
Yeah.
Is it all fake?
Or is it some weird mix of both?
Yeah, and that brings us to like another layer of this whole Decca Heggie thing.
Okay.
This gang he claims to run, the firm.
Oh, yeah, the fur.
Over 300 guys, apparently.
Right.
Involved in security, protection. He even mentions looking over drug deals.
Which, that's a bit sus, if you ask me.
It's all very sus.
Yeah.
So is this real, or is it all just part of the persona?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
We'll dig into that right after this.
So we're back, and I got to say, my head's still spinning from those Stephanie calls.
Yeah, that's something else.
But now we're getting into the firm business.
Right.
This supposed gang, 300 strong, that Decca Heggie says he runs,
Yeah.
all about security, protection.
Mm-hmm.
But then he throws in that looking over drug deals bit.
Yeah, which,
Kind of muddies the waters a bit, don't you think?
It does. And that's the thing with Heggie, isn't it? He makes these bold claims, But when it comes to the details, he gets really vague.
Totally, yeah. It's all, I don't like to talk about it online.
Right.
Which, let's be real, makes the whole thing sound even fishier.
Exactly. If it's all on the up and up, why the secrecy?
Right. Like if you're proud of your security work, why not be open about it?
Exactly. So it makes you wonder, is this a real organization?
Yeah.
Is he exaggerating?
Or is it something else entirely?
Yeah. Is he trying to scare people with this gang talk?
Yeah.
Or is it all about looking tough,
Attracting a certain type of follower.
Exactly.
It's like he's dropped us right into some gangster film.
Yeah.
And not even a good one. Like some low-budget thing.
Right. Where everyone's trying way too hard.
Exactly.
And that performative aspect, I think that's key to understanding Heggie.
I think so, too.
Like, take his claims about going nationwide with the security business, yeah.
Yeah, taking over doors all over the UK.
Right, it's less of a business plan and more like...
a movie script he's writing in his head.
Exactly.
Oh, and don't forget the name dropping.
Oh, God, the name dropping.
1 minute, it's Tyson Fury's trainer. The next, he's doing security for some big-time celeb.
Right, he's always trying to build himself up.
Yeah, like he's rubbing shoulders with the elite.
Creating this aura of importance.
But how much of it is actually true?
Who knows?
It's like he's building this whole mythology around himself.
Yes.
With these exaggerated stories and these unlikely encounters.
It doesn't even matter if it's true, really.
It's about the image.
Exactly, the narrative he's creating.
But then he goes and flips the script again.
Ooh, how so?
He starts talking about being scared of being exposed.
Oh, right.
About trolls online, making up rumors, fake police reports.
Right, you'd think the hardest man in Britain wouldn't be bothered by a few internet trolls.
Right.
Classic deflection tactic, though.
Is it?
Yeah, you see it all the time. Playing the victim.
Oh, interesting.
It's a way to shut down criticism, control what people say about you.
So he wants to be the untouchable hard man, but also the misunderstood victim.
Exactly. And that's what makes him so fascinating, right? You never know what you're going to get.
It keeps you guessing.
Exactly.
And it all ties back into this thing he does, blurring the lines between truth and fiction.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, remember that story about him jumping off a bridge?
Oh, yeah, that was a wild one.
Claims he only survived because a police van happened to be driving over at that exact moment.
Oh.
It's so out there.
It's so over the top.
Like, he can't help but embellish, even when it comes to something as serious as, like, mental health.
Right, and suicide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes analyzing him so frustrating.
It is, isn't it?
He gives you these little glimpses of vulnerability, these things that could be real struggles.
Yeah.
But then he frames them in such a theatrical way.
Yeah.
You just never know what to believe.
It's like he's performing authenticity.
Right. Like, he wants us to see him as this complex person, but he's so aware of the image he's putting out there.
It makes you wonder, is that self-awareness just another part of the manipulation?
Oh, that's a good point. Like, is he doing all of this on purpose?
Right. Is there some bigger plan we're not seeing?
Or has he just gotten so lost in this persona that even he doesn't know it's real anymore?
It's like trying to grab onto water.
It really is. Just when you think you've got a handle on
It
things.
slips right through your finger.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to try to unpack in this final part of our deep dive.
Into Deca Heggie, the enigma.
The one and only. So we've really gone deep into Decca Heggie's world, haven't we?
We really have, yeah.
All these contradictions, the wild claims, the relationships, the lines between what's real and what's, performance.
Still a lot to unpack.
It really is. And I think there's this one element we haven't really talked about yet.
Okay.
But I think it's actually key to understanding, like, the whole Decca Heggie puzzle.
Yeah. I'm intrigued. What are you thinking?
I think it all comes down to the audience.
Ah,
Like,
interesting.
every word he says, every story, every time he exaggerates something, it's all for them, for the people watching.
That's a really good point. Actually, you're right. He's always aware of the camera.
Right.
Of us, the audience, the people watching these videos, analyzing him.
Yeah, it's not just about him living his life. It's like he's documenting it,
Exactly.
creating this narrative,
Absolutely controlling how he's seen.
Yeah, and it's like, remember when he's on the phone with Stephanie
Ah, here we go.
and he tells her to call him the governor during sex?
Oh, God.
It's not just controlling at that point. It's
Yeah.
a performance.
Right.
He wants that reaction.
Of course.
He needs to be that hard man, even in, like, the most intimate moments.
It's all for the persona. It's crazy.
It really is. It speaks to something deeper, though, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like, this need for validation,
Oh, tone
for attention, even if it's negative attention.
Right. It doesn't matter. As long as people are talking about him.
Exactly. He needs that notoriety, the controversy.
And that's why Deca Heggie is such a fascinating case study.
He really is.
Because is he this master manipulator
Right.
playing us all like a fiddle?
Pulling the strings.
Or is he just a guy who's really struggling
Yeah.
and looking for connection in, like, the only way he knows how?
Yeah. It's sad, really.
It is, and you almost feel bad for him.
You do.
But then he does something else, and you're like, wait, hold on.
Exactly.
We'll never know for sure, I guess.
I don't think so. It's probably a bit of both. Yeah, a mix of all these things, his personality, what he's been through, this whole internet age where everyone's trying to be famous.
It's a recipe for this kind of persona, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
And maybe that's the point.
That
They
makes sense.
spent all this time trying to figure out the real Decca Heggie.
Yeah,
But maybe that doesn't even exist.
that's a good point.
Maybe this is it. The performance, the contradictions, the way he's built this whole persona.
It's like a character you can't break out of, you know?
Exactly. Maybe that is the real Decca Heggie, or at least the version he wants us to see.
And that leaves us with more questions than answers, really.
Doesn't it? It always does.
But I think that's the beauty of a deep dive like this.
It is,
It's not about judging anyone or saying who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the gray areas, the complexities.
Of human nature, right?
Yeah. Especially when it's playing out online for the whole world to see.
So, what do we make of Deca Heggie? I don't know.
It's tough to say, isn't it?
He's a piece of work, that's for sure.
That he is, but I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of him.
Me neither. Not by a long shot.
And maybe, just maybe, that's exactly what he wants.
Maybe you're right.